What do you want to do with your time?
Yeah.
What's important to you? What matters to you? I'll be honest with you. My kids matter to me. That's what matters to me. And that's probably the biggest reason that I'm involved in Surfrider.
Welcome back to episode 2 of the Surfrider podcast, brought to you by the Surfrider Foundation. My name is David Scales. I'll be your host. And for today's episode, we're going to take you to the beautiful beach hamlet of Montauk at the east end of the Long Island Peninsula in the state of New York. It's a community that is under increasing threat of coastal erosion and diminishing water quality. We'll also assess the human and environmental factors that exacerbated these threats, and then outline plans for mitigation and avoidance of similar problems within your own community. But before hearing more from Taylor and Liev Schreiber and other Montauk residents, here's a word from Surfrider CEO Dr. Chad Nelsen.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cool coincidence that we're starting here because I actually have a really cool personal story that's connected to Montauk. My grandfather, my mom, both my parents are New Yorkers, but my grandfather was a captain of the New York Fire Department. And he used to go out to Hither Hills and Montauk where there's a campground and set up kind of one of those MASH style canvas tents. And my mom and my uncle and my grandmother would spend the whole summer in Montauk. This is in the 50s. Wow. And my grandfather would commute back and forth to his fire job in the city. And I'll share it with you. I have an incredible poster. It has my grandfather and my grandmother as youngsters on the beach in an ad selling lots in Montauk. I think they were $40, and you could buy one with a down payment of $5, and it was $1 a month or something. It was crazy. I wish my grandfather had bought one of those. Like, my family has kind of old 16 millimeter film of my mom as a little girl, like playing in the dunes in Montauk. So I have a pretty neat personal connection to the place. I remember visiting Montauk and surfing ditch plains like in 1999. And I think that's, I was pretty early on the job here. And that's right around when our chapter out there formed. The Eastern Long Island chapter is kind of like Montauk sort of and moves west, East Hampton. So we've been in the community for at least 25 years.
In addition to the Surfrider Foundation's Southern California headquarters, the organization is comprised of a national network of chapters with volunteers who serve as the first response to local threats. They are the boots on the ground who collaborate on both the local and the national level with regional staff and experts. Mara Diaz is one such expert. With a background in marine biology and a master's in environmental policy, she is Surfrider's water quality manager and also a resident of Montauk.
A background on Montauk. Montauk is part of the town of East Hampton, right at the eastern end of Long Island, at the tip of the South Fork. And, there's a long stretch, a very narrow stretch that we call the Napeague stretch that connects it with the rest of the South Fork. And I think you could certainly see where in the not too far future, if we got hit by a pretty big storm, the ocean could overflow into the bay and Montauk could become an island. The sea level's rising, storms are happening. We've been really lucky. We haven't had a big hurricane or coastal storm here in a while. Yes, we had Super Sandy, but it didn't really affect us as far as the erosion, way out here on the East End. So Montauk is a very unique place. It's, part of Long Island, yet it sort of sits on its own semi-island all by itself. And it just has a freer sense to it. If you live there, it's because there's a reason for it, right? Like, you fish, you surf, you love the water, and it's a very special place.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating place. It's the end of the road, right? It's out at the tip of Montauk. historically a fishing town. Like there's a railroad that goes out to the end of Montauk that you can take from the city, which was built basically to allow people from New York City to get out there to go fishing. I don't know exactly when that was, but I don't know if that was the 30s or 40s, but a long time ago. It's cold and dark and snowy in the winter, so the seasonal population is small. I think it's 3,000 or 4,000 people, at least pre-COVID. And so it was super seasonal, all dating all the way back to like my grandparents. And it's got great surf. And in the last, 10 or 15 years, it's kind of become like a hotspot. It seemed to be for a long time the place that kind of was like left alone. It was too far away. And so the surfers kind of and the fishermen and locals kind of had it to themselves. So it's certainly changed, and that's created a fair amount of tension between the locals and the seasonal visitors and all the hype around that.
The recent influx of tourism into Montauk really can't be overstated. It's a village with just 4,300 residents, but they get about 30,000 visitors each month through the summer. There's also very few sewers. Instead, buildings are on septic systems. So 30,000 visitors means that those restaurants and hotels need to have their systems pumped out daily. The septic systems are a threat to groundwater and general water quality, and the erosion is a threat to those septic systems. So water quality and coastal erosion are front of mind for Montauk residents.
So from Surfrider's perspective, the two biggest issues that are affecting Montauk, and its environment would be water quality and erosion. If I start with water quality, since that's the area I work in, here on the eastern end of Suffolk County, there really are very few sewers. So almost all the homes are connected to septic systems or even cesspools, which are basically holes in the ground that all of the wastewater, sewage, stuff from the shower and your sink go just to a hole in the water. And what happens is that sort of percolates through the soil until it hits groundwater and eventually ends up in some surface water, bay, pond, ocean. And what's been happening by not treating our wastewater, we have too much nitrogen in our bays and our harbors and our coastal ponds, and that has fed these harmful algal blooms, which, it affects shellfish, and they cause fish kills and can even make the water poisonous for humans to be in. Pets have died, dogs have died from drinking, the water in Georgica Pond, so we're talking about, like Steven Spielberg and his neighbors type level of homes have had the water become poisonous because of these harmful algal blooms. So Montauk, like the rest of the East End, is, using these septic systems and cesspools, and they're just not treating our wastewater well enough. What Surfrider has been doing around this issue is about 10 years ago, we advocated successfully for this new water quality improvement program, which would take a portion of the community preservation funds and allow those to be spent towards water quality improvement projects. So that's been pretty successful. But there just hasn't been the investment to get people off of these polluting and old technology septic systems. So this past year, we joined this large coalition of groups that was working to pass a ballot measure back in November, which has established a new water quality fund by raising taxes and sales tax by like a eighth of a penny, right? Like it's minimal, but combined together, it's going to provide millions of dollars for sewage upgrades and getting upgrades of the septic system. So that's really going to be a game changer as we see that rolled out, because we know what the solutions are, but they're just really costly, and it's a lot for an individual homeowner to carry. With erosion, our beaches are really meant to be able to move their dynamic systems. So when we put hard surfaces down, build too close, and try to like fence them in, what happens is we lose our sand, and we'll have water coming up close to those hard structures. And, our our first reaction is to want to like save the hotel, save the house. And what Surfrider is saying is, we need to save the public beach. We need to save this environment, because beaches and dunes help protect our land from sea level rise and those coastal storms. We also have Ditch Plains Beach is, a very popular beach for surfing. And there's this trailer park that's right to the west of there that has a rock revetment in front of it. So that has also interrupted the flow of sand there into Ditch Plains. So we're seeing now almost no sand on that public beach, and the town has started to pump sand up on the beach during the summer so that it can be, people have a place to, put a towel down and sit. But, it lasts a little while and then that sand's gone. So while that can be a temporary solution, it doesn't last. It's a ton of money. And at some point, you run out of good source sand.
It's interesting. You did a great job explaining all of those things, by the way. But it's interesting when you hear the word coastal erosion, you think, or leaving those Montauk to exist in its natural state and allowing the erosion to happen, you would think means that the sand gets stripped away and the coast does erode. But the way that you're explaining it is that by putting in these preventative measures, it actually does more erosion than the natural state.
It does, because and the natural state of a beach is, depending on the tides, depending on the season, depending on what's going on with the currents and the winds, a beach will grow as sand is deposited and moved there, and it will shrink. So it's this dynamic moving back and forth depending on what's happening, with the nearshore currents, tides, winds, all of that. And by putting a fence up, we're not allowing that natural system to move and to really soak up the impacts, buffer the impacts, rising sea level, storms, all of those things. We've done it again. Downtown Montauk is an area that the town and everyone's worried about because there's a bunch of old hotels and other businesses, right? Oceanfront. This was about 10 years ago. The Army Corps, again, it was, I think, Superstorm Sandy response money, even though it was not within the immediate aftermath of that storm. It was just, we've got this money, we got to spend it. So they put down these, they're called geotextile tubes. They're supposed to be soft and temporary measures. We fought against it, Surfrider did, because they effectively work as big cement blocks and nobody ever takes them out. So we fought, we lost. I mean, there was people in the community who were literally lying in front of bulldozers and getting arrested, and Surfrider helped to defend them. But we lost that battle as well. The geotextile tubes went in. That was 10 years ago. They're still there. And what has happened is the public beach has scarfed away in front of those. So the hotels behind those tubes, they're protected. The public beach in front of it, not protected. So now the town is pumping up, sand. And they pumped up a bunch of sand they call it nourishing the beach. And they're like, oh, it was fantastic. It was great. We're like, and the sand's gone because we've had storms. So, they're going to have to spend millions and millions of dollars every year just to keep the sand on there. And, it's a temporary fix.
And this all brings us to another Montauk family, Taylor and Liev Schreiber. Taylor is originally from South Dakota. She's an environmental activist. And Liev is an actor of stage and screen. You may know him best as Ray Donovan, or for his roles in X-Men Origins, the original Scream, or alongside Nicole Kidman in the recent Netflix series The Perfect Couple. But sadly, despite those credits, Liev has fallen short of his original career ambition to be an elevator operator.
So I went to this daycare center called Greenwich House Daycare Center, and this dude Curtis, who was like the best ball player I'd ever seen in my life, would take us out to play basketball. He was also the elevator operator at Greenwich House. And it was one of those old timey elevators where you go like this and it goes up and down with a thing. And it just looked fun. It just looked like the most fun an adult could have.
That
And
is cute.
And he was also dressed really nicely, right? And you thought it was like a really well-paying position.
actually, yeah, that might have been the guy at Macy's. There was an elevator operator at Macy's. That's how old I am. I'm aging myself. There used to be a guy who would operate the elevator at Macy's. It'd be like fourth floor, ladies lingerie, that kind of thing. And that guy did have an outfit, and I kind of thought the outfit's pretty cool. So I thought, like, Curtis was the downtown version of an elevator operator, and then there was anyways, my point is that there's room for upward progression,
Do you still consider pursuing the line of work?
Yeah, but they don't make those elevators anymore.
That's true.
Like now they're all
Yeah.
just like buttons. There's some, like, when I got out of school and we had a loft in Williamsburg, my roommate and I, before it became like the Fifth Avenue of Brooklyn. We had one of those old timey elevators that you could literally ride your motorcycles into and then operate it up to your apartment and ride out into your apartment, which we did, which was not great for our floors, but yeah.
So you grew up in San Francisco, is that correct?
No, I was born in San Francisco, and my family moved to Canada when I was a very small baby.
Okay.
And then my mother and I moved to New York when I was about 4 years old. So I grew up here in New York City.
Got it. Is it true your mom knew William Burroughs?
Yeah. Yeah. She was a crazy hippie and a beat. And that was her crowd. That was, again, we're aging me. I didn't think we were going to have these conversations. But yeah, my mother was hanging out in New York City in the 60s and 70s and 50s. Before she met my dad in the 60s, but in the 50s, and she hung out with all the beats, and that's her world. Yeah.
What
All those cats. Art was always important to my mom. It was the most important thing to my mom. But it wasn't that it was hugely important, that it shouldn't be hugely important to me. Literature was something that, she got me into very early. Like I didn't go to school till I was 7, but by the time I got into school, my reading level was already crazy high because my mom had me reading. My mom had me, reading really solid books by the time I was 8, 7. That was really important to her. Literature was important to her. Culture was important to her. Art, dance, music. Those were the things that she loved, and those were the things that I got exposed to.
Why didn't you go to school till you were 7?
She was crazy, man. She grew up with hippies and beats, and she didn't like the idea, and she was a cab driver. And so I spent a lot of time sitting in an apartment on First Street and First, staring out the window. I wish I had gone to school sooner.
Okay.
I think she just felt, I think she wasn't convinced that the public school environment in New York City was the right place for me to be at that time.
She was pretty forward thinking. I still feel that way, basically.
Yeah, right. It's actually true.
I mean, and it's not like if she's giving you exposure to a world of education outside of school, then that's important. It's not like you're just sitting at home watching television,
Yeah, I was sitting at home watching a lot of television as well.
Where
I was also reading Shakespeare and the Russians, and yeah, but I needed to be. I think I wanted to be social sooner.
Okay.
I think I probably, would have made more of my life if I had been a little social sooner.
Interesting.
Actors, I think, a lot of time have some sort of social gap in their life somewhere that they're trying to fix, and that was probably mine.
Interesting. So when did you identify an interest in acting?
My grandpa used to take me to the circus. That was the beginning of me wanting to be either a clown or some kind of professional sword fighter, both of which involved acting. But professionally, probably high school. I did a play in high school and had the feeling of working in front of a live audience. And I thought, yeah, this is all right. This is cool.
Taylor, where'd you grow up?
I grew up mostly on a farm in South Dakota. Very different life from Liev, and I loved it. But as soon as I could leave, I left.
Where'd you go?
First, I went to Florida, and then Colorado, LA, and now we're in New York.
She's very well traveled.
Yeah.
Globally, you haven't even started to talk about the global stuff.
When I was in college, my family bought a boat. And when I graduated, I had this like incredible opportunity to live on it and travel. So for 3 consecutive years, we went to all 7 continents each year.
Wow.
And it was this like really incredible way to see the world and to see how also the world was changing. I was going to places like Svalbard in the very northern part of the world and Antarctica, and seeing the ice melting, seeing the animals in a very different way, seeing the conditions under the water, the reefs dying. It felt really, really sad to me. And I felt like I had this very interesting and unique and like really privileged perspective of seeing how it was changing, and it made me have this like great sadness and desire to help in some way.
Did you feel, or did you have an intuition that it was human impact that was responsible for some of those changes? And did you feel any optimism that you would be able to make an impact?
I absolutely felt like it was because of us, because of humans. Like I'll never forget, I was swimming in Bali. I was so excited to have been to Bali. It was like this place that I really wanted to visit. And I went under a wave as it was crashing over me, and I lifted my head up and a diaper hit me in the face. And I just felt like it was one of the dirtiest and grossest places I had been, and I was so disappointed. And I don't think I felt like there was anything I could do to help. I think I felt like the need was so big, and I was always reading about the plastic problem, and the island of garbage in the middle of the ocean. And I just felt like too big of a problem for me to have any impact on.
How did you guys initially connect or meet? Was it in New York?
Yeah. I was living in LA and I was visiting New York for my birthday, and I asked him out. And I was leaving on this long dive trip. I was going to be gone for 3 months. And I kind of felt like I had nothing to lose, so I asked him out.
Shot your shot. Where were you exactly? Were you at a bar? Where'd you see him?
It was at a play, or at a play that I was in, and she came back afterwards with her mom, and I was like, no way. And then the next night, not because she wasn't beautiful or amazing or interesting, but because I just I'm that's another podcast as well. So
He thought I was too young, basically.
yeah, the next night her mom DM'd me and said, you made a big mistake. Here's her number. And I was like, wow. And I called the number, and the next night I went out with her mom and her, and it was actually really fun. I just felt like I'd found my people. Like I found people I could relate to, and were even better at the things I wanted to be good at. And that's where it started.
Beautifully stated. Can you guys tell me, I don't know if this was together or separately, but your story of first experiencing Montauk? What was the draw? What brought you out there, and what was the experience?
I'd been going to Montauk since I was a little kid. But what happened was I did a movie in Australia, and someone taught me how to surf very late in life. And so I needed big, fat, slow, mushy old man waves. And I was in Amagansett, and I used to, when the kids were really little, I used to sneak off to Montauk to ride these big, fat, mushy waves that reminded me of Bondi. And my friend lived right on the point there, right where the cut is The break is probably called
People call it end of the road. I
End of
think.
the Road. Yeah, End of the Road is one, and then also Fortress is another sort of area. And I remember just walking up that beach, and this was probably 15 years ago. Um, well, I remembered Montauk for being like the fisherman's town, which is what was always cool about it. It was really chill. And as the Hamptons were getting more and more crazy, Montauk had sort of retained this vibe of being old school Americana and, great burger places and like one pharmacy and small town vibe. Um, and it had these beaches that were pristine because of the preserve and because of the military base that used to be there. And you could see stuff that looked prehistoric. I mean, they'd have these like 100-foot hoodoos that, people weren't climbing on or messing around with or hadn't been built up. So it was really a kind of pristine kind of beauty. And Montauk always had that reputation of being kind of out there at the end of the continent. It had that feeling and that vibe. And people who liked to surf knew that it was one of the few places on the East Coast where you could get really solid variety of spots and pretty decent swell year round. And I just my first relationship ended, and I wanted to be close to Naomi and the kids. I thought I want to be out here, and I like the peacefulness of Montauk. I like the chill of Montauk, and I like the nature preserve. And so I bought a property that's right on the edge of that nature preserve at the near end of the road. And when Taylor and I got together, one of, I think, the things that really was a kind of a binding element was the pandemic. And so what we did was we kind of shut up in Montauk with the kids and just had an amazing year of not really working that much and working on the home and the kids and being in nature and being at the ocean and doing all the things that we'd always dreamed about doing, but had never really stepped up to the plate and done. Um, and I think that's probably our Montauk origin story or close. Is there more you want to add to that?
I don't know. I just remember when Liev invited me to Montauk, I'd never heard of it. And we went, and it just felt like magic to me. And we would spend days where he would teach me how to surf. I didn't know how to surf.
Well, that's a bit of an exaggeration. Yeah.
You taught me how to surf.
Nah, okay.
And we just had these incredible days there, and I just fell in love with it. And I would never want to come back. It was like, let's live here all the time.
It's struggling right now, but it still has, of all of the areas out there, it has the realest vibe, like just real people in a small town, and everyone knows each other and looks after each other, and
it definitely feels like a tight-knit community.
Yeah, there's a real sense of community there. And I also do think there's something to the mystique of the place and the military base.
But I think because of its history as this fishing town and known for its surf, I think it attracts a different kind of person than the rest of Long Island or the Hamptons.
It's far. You have to haul ass to get out there, which is good because it keeps the riffraff out, or it used to keep the riffraff out. It's getting harder and harder.
So how did you decide to get involved? And then how did you connect with SurfRider?
Well, Taylor was the one who really first got involved with SurfRider.
I think I just was feeling, especially during our time in Montauk, during the pandemic, when life felt really slow, and we had this window into nature and our surroundings, and feeling like, at least I felt overwhelmed with how much wrong there was in the world. Like, you turned on the news and people were dying, there were wars, famine, and it just, and then our oceans are being filled with plastic, and there'll be more plastic than marine life in 30 years, and you take a walk on the beach and it's filled with garbage, and it just felt like this really overwhelming time. And I remember feeling almost paralyzed by it and not knowing how to help or what to do, but knowing that I would feel better if I did something. And I think that that's confusing, because a lot of times that can come back to, like, well, am I going to drink with a straw today? Is that going to make an impact? And a friend introduced me to Surfrider, and I just felt like a sigh of relief, I think, because here was this organization that was doing multiple things to make a tangible impact, and that felt really good to me. It felt like somehow I was making a difference.
I think one of the things that you said earlier on is really important is optimism. And one of the things that I've always liked about Surfrider is, when I think of optimism, I think, these problems seem so huge, and how do we begin to deal with them? But the thing that we really, really need is optimism, I think, and the notion that we are capable of doing extraordinary things. That, like, for instance, the Montreal Protocol, when there was a big hole in the ozone, and Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, who aren't, like, known for being ecology warriors, accomplished this incredible thing where they got the whole world to reduce hydrofluorocarbons, and we actually closed the hole over the planet, which is extraordinary. Like, it's the kind of thing you make movies about, right? So what we're capable of is not in doubt. And I think optimism is a really important tool. And I got that feeling when I met the guys from Surfrider, that was a component of it. The other thing that's really, really huge is to lead with science. And that's the other thing that I like about Surfrider, is that's what they do. They break it down, and they follow the science. And I think that's really key to successful strategies. As it seems like we're moving a little bit away from that culturally. And I think it's important that we check back in.
Great. I think your role, the way that you stated it, is helpful. And earlier when we were talking about feeling powerless to change as an individual, the reality is Surfrider has so many layers of professionals, either on the ground at the beach or lobbying in Capitol Hill. But the general public isn't aware of those complexities because it's actually not very sexy to share all those details, And so the community feels powerless, but through your messaging, in the roles that you guys are in, if you could just share the messaging and the community gets involved, and then they see all of the complexities and the inner workings of Surfrider and how vast the network is and sophisticated its approach is to dealing with stuff, then I feel empowered to get involved as an individual. I can plug into the system. So you guys kind of helping shine a light on the community, and I think that's really helpful.
There's a lot you can do. There's so many different levels of participation. I think, if you want to just help, you can give.
Yeah.
I think if you want to do something, there's so many different things you can do. You can create, there are these very cool groups that go out and clean up beaches. You want to test water, you can test water. You want to help out with lobbies. There's so many angles of attack on this problem, from doing really almost nothing to getting very, very involved. And I think that's what an organization has to do to be successful, is that they've got to provide the opportunities for people to join.
And I think just the awareness of all that Surfrider is doing is so important, because when we've talked to people in our community about it, it's like, well, what is it, like a beach cleanup? And
By the way,
which
beach cleanups are awesome.
you-
They're
Yeah.
really fun.
they
It's
are,
necessary.
Wait,
but it's sort of like, that's a very superficial approach to the bigger issue, which they're also tackling. So I think it's, people understanding how much Surfrider is doing. That's really important.
Yeah.
And also just who they are. I think a lot of people don't even realize.
and
Well,
what? Yeah, sorry.
no, go ahead, please.
What do you want to do with your time?
Yeah.
What's important to you? What matters to you? I'll be honest with you. My kids matter to me. That's what matters to me. And that's probably the biggest reason that I'm involved in Surfrider. And that's probably why I like beach cleanups, which was something that Taylor got us into long before we knew about Surfrider. And that was I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to do this with my kids. Those are the values that I want to impart to my kids. This is what I want my kids to know about these things. And that was, that's where, for me, it all began, was just, what are the values that I want to impart to my children, and how do I do that? And there's really no more exciting and fun way to impart those values than the ocean. And to be honest, it wasn't even conservation. I wasn't thinking about the world's oceans or any of that. I was thinking about my kids and how am I going to engage them on a Sunday with something that matters? And that grew into this kind of bigger perspective. But I think that piece, what do you want to do? What do you care about?
Yeah. I mean, look, that environment, it's a microcosm, right? Montauk is. And so if you're there and you see the change over the decades and you want your kids to have a great time in this location that you've loved so much, and you see it going away, then obviously you feel a need to protect it for them.
One of the great things about Montauk as a community is that you've got this huge preserve. So we know what the natural world does, and we know what the developed world does. It's very clear. There's a point where it stops, and you can watch both.
Yeah.
But I would say that there's also this bigger meta issue of climate change, and how that's changing the storm cycles in our region, and how that affects erosion is a whole other component, because we're noticing these storms getting bigger and badder every year and closer together. And I do believe that that's something that we can affect change on.
In closing, I'm curious about your guys' surf exposure.
We don't really follow much surf media, although what's that fun? Kook Slams is
Kook Slams is
Could
amazing.
be on that someday.
Kook Slams is something that we see on the Instagram every once in a while that gives us some pleasure.
I know.
It makes us feel better about our surfing.
We
Totally.
have a lot of friends who are surfers, and they write articles, and then those times we see them when they do this stuff, like
I don't know. I just I'm not surfing to me is this, I really just like the paddle out, and I like to be in the ocean and feel like I'm a part of it. And then, maybe if I'm lucky, I catch a wave back in. But
yeah, we're becoming that. Actually, I'm becoming that, and I'm forcing her into that, because I find it increasingly harder to get up. And so now we're like, yeah, you know what? It's cool to just be out here.
let's just paddle.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful sunset. Doesn't matter that I missed those last 3 waves. There's whales here. Yeah.
You guys are fully formed surfers. You'll be glad to know. I've been interviewing surfers on a surf podcast for a decade, and the ones who have been doing it for 50 years, and they've surfed all the greatest waves in the world, won world titles. At the end of it all, they say exactly what you just said.
Great.
They're like, I was trying to get better for decades and decades and realizing it was a futile pursuit. And now it's like, I just want to paddle out, feel the sun, feel the water, glance back at the land, and just absorb it. Like, that's it, So good on you.
My favorite.
That was our last trip. We were up in the house, and the great thing about my house is you have a view of the ocean, and it was whale season, and we saw this huge line of bait fish, and we were with her friend Jill, who had surfed as a little girl in Mexico and hasn't surfed in ages, and we were like, let's go out and see the whales. And we really just needed the surfboards to paddle out to see the whales, so we had something to stand on, and so that when the sharks came, we'd be cool. and we paddle out, and on the way back, there's literally this like ankle high, tiny little wave. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool if we could get Jill to try and surf? And Jill Plattner, by the way, the jeweler who designed some of the Surfrider stuff. And I was just joking, and I was like, Jill, paddle onto that wave. It's like a little ankle high wave. Go for it, go for it. It was a total joke. No one could get on this wave. But she was on like a 9-foot board, and she paddled for it, and she got up, and sure enough, she like grabbed the front edge of her board. And on this like 6-inch wave, acted like she was, going to get barreled. And we all
That's
did.
amazing.
We all got up on this, and it was like the best day of surfing.
Surrounded by whales.
The ones you
and
never expect.
paddling through bait fish.
Yeah.
I mean, this day was insane.
Yeah.
That
It was
is amazing. Do you ever get any special treatment in the lineup because of your celebrity status?
On the contrary,
Okay.
Yeah, that's a whole nother.
sometimes I get special treatment because I'm such a kook, and people be like, okay, let him go. You get that. But no, I've never gotten special treatment in the lineup, and I freaking live there. That's the other thing where I feel like I should get a little more respect in this lineup. And nobody ever watches when I actually get one either, too. That's the other thing. People are like, hey, I'm up. You know that sound that people make when they want people to know that they're up? Woo!
Totally.
That's
That
Yeah.
sound comes in different tones, and each has a different meaning. So you have to really get clued in.
That's true.
So do you have any stories of getting hassled in the lineup because of your status?
Costa Rica.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that.
Okay.
I didn't even know.
Oh yeah.
That was not healthy.
Fair
Just
enough.
like local, just grabbed my ankle, and I was like,
Yeah, tried to
Okay.
fight him.
yeah, okay.
Because he knew who you were specifically, or
I
he
don't
was
think
just
so. I think he was just grabbed my ankle. I don't think he knew who I was. Somebody wanted to fight. People want to fight in the water. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's this really possessive nature around the wave. It's really that part I really can't stand about surfing. I won't paddle out unless there's like less than 3 people in the water because I just don't. It just takes away the joy for me.
Yeah, well, that means it's working. That localism has kept you out
It
of
gets
the water.
crowded. It gets crowded. Like, Ditch is an amazing
Ditch planes.
yeah, Ditch is an amazing spot, but I wouldn't go there now. It's like nuts. It's so packed. It's
Crazy.
so crazy. You got to go there like, when it's a little more quiet, which is great because there's still like September and October are really beautiful. And it's really a lot less people. But that's the other thing is you got to make room. You got to make room
Yeah.
because people love it. It's a whole new thing now.
Non-surf related question. I'm just curious for Liev. Do you ever get starstruck at this point in your life? Or when was the last time you got starstruck?
Well, we went to Cynthia Rowley's show, and who shows up but Garrett McNamara? Yeah.
No way.
And
And
he's sitting right next to me. He's sitting right next to me. And I'm like, oh, and I go, hi, I'm a big fan of Liev Schreiber. And he turns around, and he just gives me the biggest smile and hug. And we just started hanging out and working out, go to the gym together. And he's just a great guy. But I was, for me, meeting him, because I think he's crazy. And I'm that,
in a good way, crazy in a good way.
Yeah, crazy in a good way.
Yeah.
But like crazy in a way that I relate to. I was starstruck. Like
because we watched his show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the show. And I just loved his wife, and I loved his attitude, and I love how cranky he is. I love how old he is. I love all the things that he's pushing through. I love his injuries, and I love the way he deals with it. And it's not as picture perfect as a lot of people would make it. And I love that about him. I love that he's gritty and grindy, and he's just a real person. And that was exciting for me to meet Garrett.
That's a great
But
pick.
that's a surf related story. Do I get starstruck around actors? Not so much.
Yeah,
I'm an actor and I know that it's relatively safe what we do.
gotcha.
Um, what Garrett did was bonkers. I've been talking about it a lot because people are trying to write it for a movie, and that thing about tilting at monsters, I think is really close to Garrett's heart. So I'm glad that he got to be the guy to tilt at that particular monster, because I know that has meaning for him. Taking on things that are too big or too scary or too hard or too, sort of like what SurfRider is trying to do, is tilting it, taking on these big beasts and finding strategies for dealing with them. And that was for me, what was so uplifting about the 100-foot wave was seeing a human being attack a problem and go, yeah, okay, I stayed up.
Yeah.
And then more human being going, wow, we can do this. And I think that component of optimism is what I think is so important to these issues, to the kinds of stuff that we're dealing with at SurfRider. It can be done.
What we really need to do is think about more nature-based solutions, building up the dunes naturally, perhaps moving some of those hard structures away from the impact zone and giving those natural dune systems room to grow, live, thrive, move. That's not something that people really want to talk about. They really, really want to say that the sand pumping, the dredge and fill, the beach nourishment is going to get us out of this problem, but it's not. It's very temporary. So we have to restore those natural systems. SurfRider has a climate action program where we're working with local communities to try to implement natural ways of buffering their coasts by supporting dunes and mangroves and those types of communities to better support the coast. If you look over in California, we've done an amazing job at this at Surfers Point in Ventura, California, where we worked with local stakeholders, the local government, to pull some hard structures away from the beach and really build the dunes back up. And it's been an amazing example of the way that you can go into an area that's not pristine and say, we have a problem here. Do we want to throw more rocks down, lose our beach, and hold on to this, 50-year-old hotel? Or, I mean, it was like a parking lot and a bike path.
Mhm.
Or do we want to relocate some of those structures and really support a healthy beach that can be used by the public at large? It's so important for the local economy. So those are the types of difficult decisions communities are having, and SurfRider's really trying to lead them towards more of those natural solutions.
We do have good news, and it's a direct result of these community efforts.
Yeah, in November at the election, Suffolk County, which is that county, passed a water bond to invest, I think, $6 billion in water quality infrastructure in Montauk and Eastern Long Island. So they're dedicating real money to solving this issue, which is phenomenal to see. They're basically taxing themselves to build the infrastructure needed to solve the problem.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so if you care about Montauk, you surf out there, you visit. We have the Eastern Long Island chapter. So these are locals in the Montauk area that are doing all kinds of stewardship, beach cleanups, water quality monitoring, getting involved in local, state, and county political issues to try to solve plastic pollution, coastal erosion, and water quality issues. It's a great group of people making a difference.
Excellent. They do a gala. Is that yearly?
Yes. Yeah. We do something called the One Ocean Gala every August. I think we're probably on our 8th one. So This is a fundraising event. We've been holding it at the Crow's Nest, which is one of the sort of cool restaurant hotel establishments out there. Sean McPherson, the owner, has been a long time SurfRider supporter.
Sweet. And for those who don't live in Montauk but are listening to the podcast, is there a way for them to directly get involved with that specific chapter?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a couple things you can do. If you become a member of SurfRider, so if you join SurfRider, sort of there's power in the numbers of members out there. So if you join, if you're a member anywhere, you're contributing to the like power everywhere. So that's a way to help, you know, and if you wanted to support SurfRider and donate, you know, we use that money to support Montauk and all the other places we work. One of the sort of like fundamental premises of SurfRider is we need locals in their communities to make a difference. And, you know, I've been doing this for a long time and I've seen that proven true time and time and time again. You know, Tip O'Neill, an old congressman, said all politics are local, and he's right. Yeah. And so if there's not a chapter in your part of the world, you can contact us and we'll help you form one. You know, and there's 200 chapters and clubs across the country. So the odds are that you're within striking distance of one of them. And if you're not, yeah, please reach out to us. If you're motivated to get involved and build something, we'll help you.
Is there any qualification requirements for people?
There's not a requirements for people, but you got to go through a process. So you got to like, you know, organize people. We have a very clear step-by-step process to do it, but you got to organize people, set up some events, basically show proof of concept that you're committed to organizing. And if you can do that, then, you know, and we'll hold your hand along the way.
Amazing. Surfrider.org is where you go to learn more about Montauk and all of SurfRider's initiatives. My name is David Scales for the SurfRider podcast, and I am reminding you that the ocean needs more friends. So become a member at surfrider.org.